Welcome to another fantastic, fabulous, and epic show of my Orgasmic Life podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Gaia Morrissette. And today we're going to talk about Licky Licky. This is a redo because the last time I did this episode, I didn't have the sound on. So we just want to make sure all the sound's working. Yep. Okay, we're good. All right. So before we get into our topic, two really important housekeeping things. Number one, this episode is brought to you by Tickle.life. Tee-hee. Second thing is that as I show up for you, I would love for you to show up for me and support my Orgasmic Life podcast. And you can do that in many different ways. You can post comments, share with your people, listen to my actual podcast on Google, Spotify, Apple, tell your friends about it. But then the most important part is to help with spreading the word, but also helping with the overhead costs of running the show. The show's not cheap for me to run and create. So I lovingly invite you, if you've been inspired by my Orgasmic Life and you're like, I want to support Gaia's work that she does in the world, then you can become a Patreon of Patreon. And you get all this incredible free content that only if you are on Patreon do you get. So you get all this bonus stuff. So for as little as $5 a month, you can support what I do in the world. All right. Okay. So that's it. So let's get into our topic. Ready? Licky Licky. Cunnilingus, which is just kind of fun to say. Cunnilingus. It makes your tongue do all sorts of fun things. Okay. So first things first. There are 5, before I get into the actual 5 how-to tips, okay? The really, really important thing is that no matter how good you are or you think you are when it comes to being able to give oral sex to vulva owners, you can always learn something new. And the reality is that each vulva is different. And what each vulva likes changes from moment to moment, okay? So I really lovingly invite you to kind of lean in and let go of the expectations that you might have on yourself or the preconceived ideas or attached to your ego, the ego about, oh yeah, I'm totally like a rock star. I'm totally great at eating pussy, okay? So I want you to let go of all of those pieces so that you can really listen to today's episode with an open mind and allowing yourself to learn new things. And by learning new things doesn't mean that your skill sets that you have aren't awesome or that you're not awesome or that you're not a great lover. Okay, so very, very important. I just want to start the show off before we get into all the tips, all right? Okay, so there's like 5 tips that are really, really important to giving epic oral to vulva owners. The first one is teasing. So I'm going to list them and then I'm going to go into what each one of them is. So the first one is teasing. The second one is pressure. The third one is body language. The fourth one is mapping out the vulva. And the fifth one is bringing it home. Okay, so those are our 5 tips. Those are our 5 categories. So let's bring teasing. So one of the biggest and the most common complaint from vulva owners is that their lovers go to their vulva too quick, meaning that it's like it's not awake yet. Like it's not awake, it's not open for business, it doesn't want to be touched, it doesn't want to be poked, it doesn't want to be prodded. It's not open yet. It's not awake. And when it gets, and it feels kind of, it can be painful, it can be uncomfortable, it can be like, whoa, like there's this overwhelming sensation of like resistance to the sensations that are happening in the vulva because it wasn't awake yet. So in order, before we go to the, go right for the genitals, all right, we want to wake up. We want to wake up the whole body, and we're going to tease. We're going to tease the vulva, okay? And I'm going to tell you how to do that. Before I do that, I want to say thank you so much for all the loves and all the hearts and all the thumbs ups and all the great comments people are coming through. All right. I love you guys. You're all amazing. All right. Okay. So back to teasing. That we eventually, think of it this way. The more I tease, the more I please. Say it with me. The more I tease, the more I please. And teasing, so first you want to wake up the whole body. Okay, so this can be done in different ways. We want to wake up the whole all the erogenous zones of the body. Okay, so you want to kiss the face, and you want to kiss and touch the neck, and you want to move, kissing and touching and licking and light tickly touch, and maybe some light scratching with some like kissing, and you want to wake up the whole body. So this is part of the teasing process. So as you're like waking up and tickling and touching the whole body, and you're moving down towards the vulva, and the vulva is like, ooh, and the brain, the vulva owner, is like, ooh, oh, ooh. Are they going to touch it? Are they going to touch it? I hope they touch it. I want them to touch it. Because now, but you're doing it slowly, like you're slowly, and you're going. So let's say this is so everybody who's watching, and then everybody who's listening. So you're moving your hand slowly, or your mouth slowly towards, very slowly, like when you think you're too slow it down even more. And you're coming close to the mound, and then you're coming close to just about ready to touch, and then you move away, and you move to the inner thigh, and you start moving down the leg. And then you start coming back up, and you slowly kissing and licking, tickling, scratching, but very slowly, very, very slowly. And so you're moving back up, and you're coming, and the vulva owner's brain's like, oh, maybe this time, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm so excited. It's going to happen. And it starts to come, you hear it start to come up, and then you're starting to move towards the vulva, and you're just like, whether it's your hand, hold on, I got to sneeze. Bless me. All right. So I'm going to pause, and I'm teasing you in the moment. Take a drink. My mouth's dry. All right, where was I? Oh, so I'm moving slowly with my mouth, my tongue, my hands coming up, and the vulva owner's brain's like, oh my God, this is it. It's gonna touch. They're gonna touch it. They're gonna touch it. I know it. They're gonna touch it. And you don't touch it, and you go across, and you move down the other leg. Right? So what's going to happen is a bunch of stuff is going on. First, the vulva owner's a frustration level is going to spike, which is going to create some arousal response, because there's anticipation and excitement, and then disappointment, but then wanting, and then still and denying, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. Plus, there's a little bit of power exchange happening, which is also, again, helping to stimulate the arousal response. And so what's happening is the more the vulva owner is aroused, the more blood is being pumped into the vulva and into the vagina, and it becoming more engorged. So by taking your time And teasing, what you're doing is you're building up and building up and building up, so that when you actually finally get to the actual touching and licking of the vulva, the clitoris, of the vagina, you don't have to do much work. Like if you do the prep work, you don't have to do very much work in the ability to have an orgasmic release at that point of the body's orgasmic release, because they're so excited and they so want it and they just need it, and why won't you give it to them? Okay. So this is when you know when the vulva is fully open and ready for business. Okay. Now the vulva owners might even swear at you. I might even call you names. I might even yell at you. So that's a good indicator. That's like, woo, the vulva is ready for business. Also, you'll start to see the whole pelvic, the whole vulva, the whole pelvic region will start to follow you. When it starts to follow you and there's this whole like, oh, come on, energy to it, then that's the moment. That's the moment when you then make contact with the vulva. So here's another wonderful teasing technique is with your mouth. Okay. So you're licking and you're kissing and you're moving. Sorry, my chair is rolling away. Hold on. Please hold. I'm having some tech difficulties. All right, there we go. Woo, okay. Ooh, as I got excited, I started to roll away. All right. So where was I? Oh, so some tools around with your mouth. So there's two different kinds of where you can do some hot air across the mound. Okay, across the vaginal mound, the vulva mound, across the pubic bone mound. Okay, and close to or over across the like where the labia and the clitoris is. And what you do is you can do two kinds of blowing. There is where you're blowing air out, not like you're trying to blow up a balloon, but like a light breeze. Okay, think of it like this: light breeze, especially if the vulva has been excited and it's starting to create some moisture. That will create some cool air and will create some extra sensation. The other breath, so as you're coming across, so you're starting to come to the mound and you're like, and they think, oh, they're going to touch it, they're going to touch it, they're going to touch it. And this is a teasing technique. And then you just do some light blowing as your mouth is just hovering above, and you continue on your journey to another part of the body. So you can do light blowing, or you can do hot air, where it's more of a happening. And those will create some sensations. You're not actually touching yet, but it will create some sensations on the vulva and the clitoris, depending on if there's some moisture going on there. Okay. All right. So teasing. Tease until the vulva yells at you, follows you around. Okay. That's the first rule. The second is, let's talk about pressure. So often people go too hard. They create too much pressure, too intense pressure. And again, you want the vulva, the clitoris, the labia to be, awake. And you've teased it, so it's really awake. So it's super, super sensitive now at this point. So applying too much pressure can cause pain. So it's really important. What you want to do is you want to start with really soft, almost non-existent pressure with your tongue. It's just the tip of your tongue. Okay? And allow just to do some licking and change, doing different directions and, starting, we're going to get into later on, we'll get into like the logistics of mapping out the vulva, but it's really important that you don't want to go too hard, too fast, and it's not ready, because all of that work that you just did for the teasing, you will ruin because there's a reaction, which is like, ow, that hurts. Okay. So start really, really gentle with very little movement. If you've teased it well enough and the vulva owner is capable of surrendering to pleasure and dropping into the sensations, then you just making contact with the tip of your tongue to the clitoris may produce an orgasmic release. May. There's lots of circumstances that need to happen, but you want to start very softly, okay? Then this is where we lean into starting to look at the body language. So depending on what the vulva owner's body language is doing, you'll know whether or not to apply a little more pressure. You can also ask. This is an important part. Like, cunnilingus is not just about, communicating with your tongue. It's also about using your words. So you can ask at that moment, how is this? Would you like some more pressure? Would you like less pressure? Do you like the speed? Do you like, what I'm doing? Like, if the person is the person isn't particularly expressive in their body language or in their verbal cues or in their sounds, you can also ask for clarification. Okay. And that's really important as the vulva owner who's receiving the pleasure. The person wants feedback, needs feedback. They want to know that you're not sleeping. If they're not doing what needs to happen, give them some direction, give them what you desire, what you want, the way that you want it. Okay. So you're going to start with, again, pressure, start light. Then you can move as it builds, the arousal starts to build and the person's body starts to build. They'll actually push. If they want more pressure, they'll actually push their pelvic into you. It's just what naturally starts to happen. So then it's also a good indicator. You're like, oh, okay, it's time for some more pressure. If they start to pull away, then it might be a good indicator that you might want less pressure. But then we're going to talk about this in the body language, because there's a little bit of a confusion in that piece. It's not always like that's the rule. Okay. So let's talk about body language. So body language from a sexual arousal response comes in many different ways. So there's vocal sounds of moans, of different sounds of pleasure. We got moaning, screaming, swearing. Those are some body language, nonverbal body language cues. All right. And then we have what our body's doing. So either we're, like I was talking about, we're either pushing, the vulva owner is either pushing in, which might indicate that they want more pressure, or they might be pulling away because they want a little less pressure. So those are subtle kind of cues of pressure points. There might be, they might be arching their back, their body muscles might be tensing, their breathing might, be increasing. These are arousal. These are indicators of arousal. Now, each person's arousal, body language cues are different. So don't think that if I've mastered this lover and these are all the indicators of their body language, and you have sex and you're having oral sex with somebody else, doesn't mean that those are the same body cues. Okay. So very important in that each person has their own body cues of arousal. And this is why, and especially in the beginning, it's really good for clarification and ask, right? So if if somebody's pushing, find out. If they're pushing in, they want more pressure. If they're pulling away, they want less pressure. So ask, is that what happened? Is that what's happening right now? You can ask in the moment, or you can make a mental note and ask later. Okay. Now, there's a thing, though, about one of the things around when pleasure starts to build and orgasm starts to build, and it's building and building and building and building and building and building, there can be this physiological tendency to want to run away. I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's some deep psychological stuff that we could get into on the reasons behind that, but not for this podcast, okay? Not for this episode. So there is this piece about, oh my God, I'm getting close to achieving orgasm. It's getting really intense. There's so much sensations. I need to pull away. And the more orgasmic, or maybe the more orgasms that vulva owner has had, the more sensitive they are, they might be wanting to pull away, but they don't actually want to pull away. So this is where communication is really important, okay? They may just need you to hold, and part of that is like holding them in place so that they can get over the intensity of it to achieve, to release, to have that orgasmic release. So very important though, is that if you don't know the lover that you're with, that you want to make sure that you check in with them. If they're pulling away, to ask them, is this painful? Do you need me to, change what I'm doing? Or is it just really intense and would you like me to hold you in place? Ask the question. This is about consent. So you don't get any miscommunications and everybody feels safe, okay? So communicate and ask, because there's something about the whole being, wanting to pull away, as well as not only pulling away, but having your lover hold you in position. And there's stuff about physical, there's all sorts of stimulation that happens in that place, if that's your thing and that it's been communicated. Okay. So make sure consent, checking in, communicating, making sure that that's what's going on. Okay. So that everybody is on the same page. All right. Mapping out the vulva. So each vulva is like a snowflake. Oh, there's no two same vulvas. And I'm going to make it even more complicated for you, that there are that actual vulva is not the same as it was an hour ago. What it desires, what it wants, what it craves, what it hungers for. It may hunger for intensity. It may hunger for really soft and gentle and sensual. It may hunger for rawr. It may hunger for, I just want to be held. It may hunger. There's all these different ways that it craves and desires. Okay? So we need to map it out every time. Think of every vulva. Every time you go to a vulva, it's like a brand new moment. And you need to figure out what I need to find the roadmap for today. In this moment, what is the roadmap? So sometimes the pleasure spot may be on the left side, just a slight above the clit, or it could be on the right side, just below, or it could be the outer labia, or it could be the inner labia, or it could be like, internally in the vaginal canal. Like there's all these, like the money spot, or the super sensitive and reactive and responsive spots on the vulva and in the vaginal canal changes depending on emotions, mood, cycle, hydration, it's like the weather. Okay, so very important for us to really drop into. I'm going to look at this as, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have the moves. All right. I'm not like, the moves worked yesterday here or may not work today. And the vulva that I, played with, 6 years ago that I really got off, and, they screamed like a banshee over and over and over again. That move may not work on this vulva. Okay. This is the most important thing. If you want to be an epic licky licky cunnilinguser, which I don't think is a word, then you must look at each time you go to the vulva. It's an adventure. And what's the vulva's adventure today? So you map it out with different things. So, you start by licking the outside of the labia. the outer labia, and then you move to the inner labia, and then you move around the clitoris, and then you try different pressure points, and you try around the clitoris, and around the clitoris and directly on the clitoris, and try different pressures, and try you back and forth with your tongue, and up and down, and then circles, and try some sucking, and try sucking on the labias, and test out where all of the spots and what reaction is happening. All right, so lick, suck, blow, apply some light pressure, apply heavier pressure. These are and all over the vulva, and see what response, see what the body language, pay attention to what the body language is doing. Okay, so the last tip is bringing it home. So first of all, I do need to say this, that we want to let go. Okay, so somebody who's listening right now made a comment about sucking always makes them come. See, the problem with that statement is it doesn't always make them come. It doesn't make all vulvas come. And it doesn't make even that vulva every time come. And that's the whole point of why we want to look at each vulva each time you go to it, as you're mapping it out to see what's going to arouse them, to allow them a safe space to have an orgasmic release. Okay, so I want to talk, before I talk about bringing it home, I really want to talk about this construct of it's not your responsibility to make the vulva owner come. It's not your job. Your job is to give lots of pleasure possibilities, pay attention, follow instructions, and allow them to drop into that place. Allow them permission, because to have an orgasm means you need to surrender. You need to let go. And some vulva owners may have a hard time in that place of surrendering and letting go. And it doesn't matter what your skill sets are. And it's not about the goal. The goal, having oral sex or any sexy experience or sexual time, is not about the orgasm. We need to let go of the orgasm, because when you start to go from then you start to create a performance anxiety. The person feels very pressured that if they don't have an orgasm for you, that you're going to be angry, or you're just doing it so that you can get them off, because then it becomes your job to do so. Or your self-esteem and self-worth is to have wrapped up in whether or not they have an orgasm, is whether or not you have your skill sets and your egos attached to it. All of those things set up for some really not sexy possibilities. And orgasmic possibilities come from a surrendering and letting go of expectations and pressure, and letting go of goals. So the idea around giving great oral sex is not about how many times can I make my lover come. It's about how many different types of pleasure and intense levels of pleasure can I facilitate for my lover. And if there's enough pleasure, with enough pleasure, orgasm is a byproduct of enough pleasure. It's not the purpose of the pleasure. And I know this is goes against, I mean, if you spend time with me, you hear me talking about this all the time. But if you're new to hanging out with me, you'd be like, what the fuck, Gaia? What are you talking about? Of course, the whole point of having an orgasm. Why would somebody be eating me out if I'm not going to come? Why would I be eating somebody out if I'm not going to make them come? That sets up a whole series of problems. I'm not saying don't come. I'm not saying that coming and orgasm isn't fucking awesome or fabulous and epic. I'm all about it. It's about, again, creating the space of pleasure. And when you map out the vulva, it allows you to give that vulva the most amount of pleasure possible. And when that vulva has enough pleasure, and if the vulva owner can surrender to that pleasure, then naturally, as a byproduct, there will be an orgasmic release. Okay, so let's talk about you're building up the pleasure and the intensity of the pleasure to facilitate the possibility, not making it happen, not controlling it, not being the purpose of it, but to support the possibility of an orgasmic release. Now, what typically ends up happening is that we get very goal focused in that moment, and then we think that if we do it faster, if we go faster, we do more pressure, then it'll make it happen more quickly or more intensely. And that is wrong. Okay? Vulvas, when they find the thing that works, they just want the same thing to continue until they ask for something else. Okay, so if whatever you're doing as it's building, and this is where the body language comes in, is as the body language is starting to maybe starting to move, and the pleasure sounds might be getting more intense, and the breathing might become more rapid, and the body is like craving and aching and wanting and desiring, and it's like starting to build and build and build and build and build. As it's starting to build, whatever you're doing that's making it build, do it exactly. Don't change the position. Not even a millimeter. Don't move what you're doing. Don't change the pressure. Don't change the speed. Don't change anything. If something needs to happen that's different, the vulva owner will either ask for it, or they will force your body into making that happen, whether they push into you or pull away or whatever there needs to be doing, okay? Don't change a single thing. And this is the piece that majority of people, struggle with, is that, but it feels so good. If it's so good what I'm doing, if I do more or faster or more intensity, then it'll be better. That's not vulvas. Vulvas don't like more or better. They just like whatever it is. Whatever is the magic equation, keep doing that until the vulva owner is either had an orgasmic release, or, very important, or has asked for something else. All right, so those are the 5 tips. Teasing, pressure, body language, mapping, your moves. You don't have any moves. Think of it that way. There is no move. There's no one move. There's many moves. And which move is going to work in that moment with that vulva in that time, you got to map it out, okay? Don't assume that you know what that vulva wants or what that vulva needs. Even if you've had sex and oral sex with that particular vulva lots, you still don't know what she wants today, what the vulva wants in that moment, okay? So let go of that piece of ego and attachment to that. All right, the last thing before I sign off, because this is a big topic, all right, is I want to have an unsexy conversation for a second. Because you can't kind of get away from it when we're talking about oral sex, taste and smell, all right? And how do we navigate that? And that, I think I might do an actual podcast about that topic of how do we have conversations about when things don't taste and smell well, but just kind of to put it in. I'm going to do one just specifically on that, but for the purpose of this conversation, I'd like to leave you with a little bit of a tip on how to navigate that. So if you've been doing your teasing part, you want to make sure that you are, you touch with your body, you're touching with your hands, you're touching everywhere. And then as you're touching everywhere, you can kind of do a smell check, for example, okay? Of whether or not it's like a pleasant smell or one that is not pleasant for you. Okay. Because we all are turned on by different sensory things. So different smells turn different people on, and different intensities of smells turn different people on. So it's not about like, well, if it's smelly, it's bad or dirty or wrong. It just may be, it may not appeal to that particular person and some other person, it might very much turn them on, the intensity of the smell. All right. So that's really important. So you kind of send in your, I like to call it send in the soldiers, do a little sniff test. If you're good, great. If it's like, whoa, that's going to distract me, and that's not something that's going to turn me on, then you can lovingly take your, vulva owner's hand and say, hey, I'm not feeling very clean. Can we go have a shower together? It's kind of sexy. I'd really like to wash your body. I'd like to wash and touch you everywhere. And I'd love for you to wash my body. And so you make it so that it's not about them, but it's about your desire, and it makes it into a sensual experience. Okay. So that's an easy way to kind of like navigate that piece. Sometimes there can be, there's certain things that can create unhealthy odors and bad taste. So if there's a slight yeast infection, or the pH balance is off, or the ecosystem that is the vulva and the vagina might be off in their diet, or stress, or things like that. There's a lot of things that can knock off the ecosystem that may make it smell not pleasant or taste not pleasant. And if that's the case, then I'm going to go into deeper on how to navigate that. But if that's the case, then you're going to need to have like a different conversation. But make sure you use a condom if you're fluid bonded, because if the vagina does have a yeast infection, you may catch it and then give it back to her, and it go back and forth, and that's a pain in the ass. So it's important that, you're kind of aware of these things. So, but I'm going to have another show. I'm going to do another show on how do we navigate taste and smell of vulvas and penises, and how do we navigate those conversations. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all. I hope you learned lots. I hope you were inspired. I hope you go out and do some licky licky. There's also some super fun tools to strengthen your tongue exercises and strengthen your endurance. And if you want to know more in greater detail, you should really take my sexual skill building program. Right now, I have a huge sale. It's only $97. Normally, it's $697. So, like, you're saving $600. I will put the link in the show notes for the coupon. And, it goes into great details about how to exercise your tongue, how to have conversations about smelling and tasting. We go into more depth of, like, I do some demonstrations. So if you're like, ooh, I want more, that's the best way. Go take my course called Sexual Skill Building, the Nuts and Bolts of Sex, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. If you want to spend more time with me in a professional capacity, the best way, I now have a beautiful hub called where you can find all of the things and all the different ways that I show up in the world, from trauma to sexual wellness to BDSM to online education to my podcasts, all of the things. Okay. So you can reach me at gaiamorrissette.com. And that's the hub. And you'll find it'll take you to all the worlds that I play in. And don't forget to listen to the podcast on Myorgasmic Life on all of your podcasting platforms, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, all the places. And just as a reminder that you really want to tune in to getting on to my podcast if you're not listening to this on a podcast format, because or my YouTube channel, because there's been a lot of changes in what I'm allowed to talk about and how I'm allowed to talk about it on many forums, especially Facebook. So I might be banned soon. Okay, so you don't want to miss out on me. And don't forget to support me by joining Patreon and getting extra free content that's exclusive to only Patreon people. All right, have a juicy day. Bye-bye.